Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Welcome back to the Be Bold podcast. When this episode goes live, I will be in Papua New Guinea, leading my annual tour there for the Mount Hagen Sing Sing. It's where about 75 to 100 tribes descend upon the Mount Hagen showgrounds wearing the most incredible traditional clothing. Now, I'm talking pig tusks through their noses and headdresses that are a foot or more high. They sing, dance, they drum during this festival, and they each try to outperform the other. Each of these groups, each of the tribes try to outperform each other. It's truly unbelievable. If you've ever even thought for a moment you'd like to go to PNG, please take a look at our itinerary for 2019 on the wandertours.com website. We're about half full already, and we always sell out, so jump on that now if you're interested in joining me next year. And what I'll do is I'll add a link in the show notes at beboldpodcast.com, and that'll go directly to the itinerary. Anyway, I'm off on this big adventure for a couple of weeks, but didn't want you to miss out on hearing from some wonderful guests in the meantime. Today's conversation is with Sara McArdle, and I'll get to Sara in just a few minutes. Just a couple of quick reminders first. Ladies can join our Be Bold Facebook group, where we have a community of over 2,600 women who share their bold goals and accomplishments, or maybe they're just looking for encouragement from others. It's a private group, but all you need to do is ask to join, and I'll add you, as long as you're female. As far as this podcast goes, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can send me a note at beth@beboldpodcast.com and let me know what you think. You can also leave voice feedback or ask a question by calling 877-280-5170. That's 877-280-5170. I would love to grow our community by featuring you and your questions on a future show. Okay, back to Sara McArdle. Sara's got an interesting story to tell. After working as a graphic designer for many years, she managed to, well, not exactly switch careers, but add a new layer to her life that has made her more fulfilled in her life as well as in her day job. And what I love about her story is that she spent a lot of time working on herself. She actually calls herself a personal growth enthusiast. She spent time investigating and thinking about her life and career. She really invested in herself. She didn't make a huge pivot into a new lifestyle, but instead she found a passion that ultimately fulfilled a part of her that she didn't realize she was missing. And then, as she was pursuing this newfound passion, something magical happened with her day job. And just everything came together, and it created a much more fulfilling environment for her there as well at her day job. Now, the bottom line is that she learned how to tap into and leverage her many talents as a human being, not just her talents in her workplace as a graphic designer. And what happened was all of this came together to make her so much happier than she had been. And what she does now is she coaches other women and helps them find their passions, believing that you don't need to completely change what you're doing to be happy, but adding to it by following what you love can make all the difference. And she really honors the fact that we all have our own path and rate of growth. And I think that's a significant thing to point out. Now, I've known Sara for many years, and I am so happy that she's got a podcast now. It's called Women Who Went For It, so you can hear stories from all sorts of women. I was actually on a recent episode of it. And if you're looking for a career change or just looking for more fulfillment in your life and work, reach out to Sara for some guidance. She'll mention in this episode where you can find her. And again, I will link to her information in the show notes. I think you'll really like this episode and Sara's perspective on creating a fulfilling lifestyle. I'm very fortunate that my passion is also my work, but I still felt really inspired by this conversation. So with that, here's Sara McArdle. Yeah, so let me tell you about that earring tree that I have, and I've talked about this on the podcast before too. So earrings are just like the perfect souvenir for me.
Yes.
They're a great way to just bring back, something super small that I don't have to worry about packing in my luggage. And somebody gave that to me years ago, that little earring tree. And it's actually a cold air return duct from a
Oh,
house. Yeah.
cool.
And anyway, someone said, you're the only person I know that needs a piece of furniture to display your earrings on.
I have mine in a picture frame with a piece of screen in it. Have you seen those? Where it
Oh,
hangs in the screen.
yeah,
I got
yeah,
it at the
yeah.
Fremont Sunday Market.
Oh,
I
I
love
have
it.
seen that.
Yeah, it
That
hangs
is
in my
great.
bathroom, and then it becomes like a display plus a decoration.
Yeah, that is great. Like piece of artwork. I like that. Yeah, I should pop up there and grab myself something like that as well. So, because I'm kind of running out of room there, I'm doubling up on earrings there. But I guess that's a clue that I should maybe pass some along to somebody. Who knows? Thanks for coming down to West Seattle.
Thanks
today.
for having
It's a little
me.
gray day today.
It is.
It's
It was
been-
so sunny.
Yeah, I know. It was so sunny, and I was out of town.
Oh, really? Were you? Where were you this time?
I was in New York City for a couple of days recording some podcasts, and then I was visiting family in New Jersey for 4 or 5 days or so, which was great. Yeah. And then I came back and there was a nice day, but now it's all gray. It's okay. But, I love my sunshine. I love my Seattle sunshine, especially in the summertime. It's just great. So anyway, thanks for coming. And let's start with kind of how a little bit on your background, or maybe, we might spend the next 45 minutes just talking big time
Sure.
on your background. But let's talk about your background and then how you became a career change agent and a life coach.
Sure. Gosh. Take me back to high school.
Let's go back to high school.
Okay. So I remember when I was 17 years old, I had been living this life trying to sort of please everybody around me. And that continued for a lot of my life. So at that point, what that looked like was me picking the exact right profession. And I didn't know what that would be for me at the time. I was kind of floundering around that big question for myself. And I knew I was going to have to pick something soon because I was going to be applying for school. And so I remember one particular conversation with my sister where she had asked, "What do you want to do in school? What do you want to major in?" And I said, "I don't know." And the topic itself was terrifying for me because it was going to outline in my mind my entire future. So I was locked up and I didn't even know where to go. So she said, "What do you love?" And I said, "Well, art, computers, I don't know, art and computers." Like that was what it boiled down to. Mm-hmm. And she said, "It sounds like graphic design to me." And I said, "What's graphic design?" So I didn't know. I lived in rural Montana, and this was in the early 90s. And I didn't have a lot of contact with graphic designers. So she got out her course book from school, turned to the description for graphic design and read it off to me. And it was, doing art on computers. And I thought, that's it. Done. I'm in. Sign me up. And then, so I basically chose the path that I was going to be stepping into for the next 20 years in a 5-minute conversation with my sister when I was 17.
Did you feel like that was a people pleaser move
I
at
did.
that point?
Yes. And I remember at the time wanting to study photography, but the message in my mind was that's not viable. The only thing you can do with that to make money is actually maybe, work at a store where you're taking portraits of families. And other than that, it's not possible to make money off photography. So I put that aside and decided this is art that I can do that's going to make money. Because everybody, the big story out there is starving artist.
Mm-hmm. And so the people pleaser part of that, it was your sister's idea or suggestion?
Actually, I don't feel like I was trying to please my sister as much as definitely my parents and my teachers who had encouraged that art part of me. But some of those messages, I can't even remember where they came from. I know there's definitely that starving artist archetype that floats around in the world, and it got embedded in me.
There's some truth to that,
There can be. And there can also be the opposite.
Well, that's absolutely true for sure. And I'm a big advocate of trying to explain to people or express that there are possibilities everywhere. We just have to look at them, or find them. But I don't know. I have friends who are artists who are very successful, and I have friends who are artists who, I don't want to say they pride themselves on being the starving artist, but there's something in their DNA that says, asking for money to do this for which I love makes it tainted. So I think that
Yes.
I think it's not just about I can't make money at this. It taints it once I start asking for money for it. So
You're absolutely right.
there's something interesting.
That, and not just with art. It happens in the coaching industry as well. It's really interesting to see. So it happens in almost all fields where people are really stepping into who they are at their most authentic, and they're used to doing that for enjoyment. And so for them, what they do for enjoyment and what they do for money are really separate things. And so they have this sense that if they ask for money for what they're doing for enjoyment, it's, like you said, going to taint it. So that's something that we actually work on in the coaching.
So yeah, that's a good point, that it's just that it's bigger than beyond the starving artist or musician or what have you. It's there's a lot of things, but it's okay to make money if you're working on a computer, because that is an industry where a lot of people, the majority of people make very good money.
A lot of people do make very good money. That is true.
As we well know here in Seattle.
Yeah.
About that. Yes, the rising costs.
A lot of tech here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I interrupted your story. So people pleaser, which is the bigger picture of really not necessarily your sister encouraging you this way, but just you felt like some kind of societal pressure that this is the avenue that you should take rather than the photography business.
Yeah, I would say that my sister planted the seed, and it was a good one, and I'm glad I stepped into that for that time. And I would say the societal seed was more to pick something and get it right and make sure it's viable and can make you money
for the long term. So what happened from there?
So I went to school and I studied graphic design, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I had wonderful classmates that I bounced ideas off of, and they collaborated with me, and we produced really cool stuff. And then I went into graphic design as a career, and then I found it to be very different than I had experienced in school. So one of my very first jobs was working at a daily newspaper, designing ads and just cranking them out with clip art, because we had to produce, I remember, I think one day I produced 20 different ads. And so there wasn't a lot of time for creativity. Just crank it out, make sure the client is satisfied enough, and move on to the next
Satisfied
thing.
enough. Was this a daily paper?
It was a daily paper. Yeah. And then one day I found myself laying out this ad that was a double page spread for a local hardware store. And I was scanning in pictures of weed whackers and riding lawnmowers and moving them around on the page. And I just thought, this is not it. This is not what I thought I signed up for. I'm sure that designing for a daily newspaper is a great fit for some people. And for me, it wasn't. I wanted more creativity. I wanted more collaboration. I wanted more heart. And so I thought, I can't continue to do this. And so at that point, what I wound up doing is stepping into nonprofit work.
How long did it take you from the day that you were actually laying that out to deciding that you wanted to do nonprofit work and getting into it? Was it weeks? Did you quit on the spot? Was it
I
months?
definitely didn't quit on the spot. So I was living at the time in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I knew by that point that I wasn't going to be living there very long, because it was great for me for hiking and enjoying the outdoors, but it wasn't a long-term fit. So it was kind of my adventure that I'd gone on after college to move there and live there and land in a place of my own. And so I knew that there was an end date for my job there, because I was going to be leaving town. And I thought, after this, I'm going to step into nonprofit. And I don't know yet what that looks like, but we'll find out.
Did you move to Seattle from there?
I did.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I moved in with some friends that I had made while I was working in Yellowstone Park in college, because I had gone to school in Montana, and I spent the summers away in Yellowstone waiting tables and cleaning rooms and that kind of thing. So I had some friends over here in Seattle that I could come stay with and live with for a while. And it was really interesting, because when I was looking out there for nonprofit positions, I found one that was interviewing with a friend that I had in Yellowstone.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So I knew that he was in Seattle doing some nonprofit environmental work, which was what I had originally wanted to do. I didn't know if it was going to be design or something else. And so I called him up, and I saw, you can interview with Greg. And when I got on the phone, I said, wait, is this the Greg I know from
No
Yellowstone?
kidding.
And it was.
Did you get that job?
I did get that job. And that was actually a fundraising job. So I took a little detour from graphic design. But the message that I kept getting was the longer that you step away from graphic design, the more the technology is going to move beyond you. You're not going to catch up. What are you doing with your life? You're doing this temporary position. So I thought, I've got to get back into graphic design.
How long were you at that job?
I was at that job for 2 years.
Okay. But were you telling yourself that message? Or
oh my gosh, it was coming from everywhere. Yeah. And in fact, when I had still been working in Yellowstone, I worked there for, I want to say 3 months after I graduated from school. And even some of the people who were sitting at my tables in the restaurant were asking me why I wasn't already working in graphic design, even though it was only a 3-month position. So definitely lots of messages out there about, how quickly you need to get out there and start breadwinning and get into the tech industry if you're anything related to tech, because it's going to get out of your hands.
And you bought into that.
I did buy into that.
Yeah. 2 years later, what happened?
So 2 years later, the organization that I was working for almost went under. So they laid off everybody but just, I want to say 4 people. And
what
there
year
have been
was
about
that?
30. Let's see, that was 2003.
So right after the kind of the bust of everything else. So like .com bust was 2000, 2001, 99. So
yes.
in there. Okay.
So then I thought, okay, this is my chance. I'm getting back into graphic design. It had been something I'd already been thinking about. And so I applied for a nonprofit in a graphic design position, highly respected nonprofit, one that could actually afford to pay a full-time designer because most of them don't have the ability to hire an in-house designer. And I got that job and I thought, okay, I'm set. This is pre-approved by everybody because the environmental job that I had been working in, every time I went home to my native Montana, people asked me what I did for a living, and that stirred up a conversation of, you're an environmentalist, you're a tree hugger. It was very divisive. And this other position was great, safe, could pay me money. It was, middle of the road. It wasn't going to stir the pot. So it was perfect. And they had a really good mission. So I could get behind the mission as well.
So this was a for-profit company.
Nonprofit.
It was a nonprofit.
Yeah, I might have said for-profit.
No.
Nonprofit.
That's fine. I'm making sure that I'm listening correctly.
Sure.
So it was a nonprofit.
It was.
But it was an environmental.
Correct. Human services.
Okay,
yes.
got it.
So you're helping the people. You're helping the children. You're good.
So nobody can complain about that. And how long were you there? Or
I actually still do some work for them. Yeah, that is part of the story.
And then, so now, as I mentioned before, career changing agent and life coach.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
No.
What happened?
So I worked for years and years at this nonprofit, and I found myself really unsatisfied, but couldn't pinpoint why. So I was trying to do all these things to satisfy myself, like, get all my friends together to go on adventures in the mountains or volunteer for this thing. And I found that that stuff was temporarily satisfying for me, but there was something deeper going on. So I started exploring inside myself with things like meditation, which I know that you also share because we have meditated together in the past. And I started getting more in touch with who am I on the inside. And I started taking these classes with a modality called nonviolent communication, which is also known as compassionate communication. And what I experienced in that was a deep understanding of myself in a way that I'd never accessed before. And I was surrounded by a community that was very supportive of one another in their personal growth. And we were meeting weekly for 2 years.
What organization or what was that specifically?
So the modality is called nonviolent communication, and it was created by a man named Marshall Rosenberg, who has since passed. And there is an international organization called the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And you can learn online, you can learn through classes in your community, but the underlying gist is that we all share the same universal human needs. And if we can connect with why we're reacting emotionally in any circumstance, it's related to us either getting a need met or not getting a need met.
So nonviolent communication, what led you to that particular program? Because I hear that and I think really straight up, you were in an abusive relationship,
Right.
or you were fighting with your family or something, that there was some big catalyst that brought you to that. Is that the case, or is that?
I had a really challenging breakup. So you're not too far off. I had a really challenging breakup where in that final conversation that we had, I thought, I don't want to show up this way in my life. I actually wasn't a strong advocate for myself in the way that I wanted to be. I wanted to be able to communicate boundaries with grace. And I knew that I needed to take some classes to be able to do that.
Obviously. I'm like speechless.
I sense a question coming on.
I know. So the thing about that is that I would think that most people would just launch into therapy. But you found a class, you found an organization that supports that. That to me is really interesting.
So don't get me wrong, I was already in therapy. Yeah.
Okay.
I love therapy.
Okay.
Yes.
Funny. So you weren't getting, and I'm sure there was nothing wrong with your actual therapy, but you needed something beyond the therapy to address specifically this issue that you were dealing with.
I think the longer I live, the more I discover that I am so multifaceted that I need a lot of different kinds of information coming my way to teach me what I need to know about how to move forward in life in the way that works best for me. So that makes me a workshop junkie. It makes me a personal growth enthusiast, which means, I'm listening to as many podcasts as possible. I have therapists, I have a coach, I go to classes, I go to workshops, I volunteer. So lots of different ways for me to learn and integrate and pull those concepts that feel right for me and kind of leave the rest behind.
That makes you a great life coach, I imagine, because you are constantly learning. You are the playground for your own learning, and you're probably taking notes and learning all these
Yes.
little pieces that you can then identify in another person and say, you can pick and choose what you've learned from these workshops and books and integrate that into what you do then.
Yeah, as I was discovering what I wanted to do next with my work, I was making lists of those aspects that I wanted to incorporate, and continual growth and learning was one of them. I wanted whatever I was doing next to require it, and for me to serve as a resource to connect people with more joy and authenticity with each other, with opportunities. So I knew those things, and I love that life coaching allows me to go out there, continue to learn, and then bring back to my clients the things that I'm learning out there in the world and connect them with even more resources.
So you're at your job, but you're kind of searching for something else in your life. You're doing some research. How did the life coaching come about? What's that story?
So the group that I was participating in the nonviolent communication with also had an offshoot group that was a leadership community that was meeting for 10 sessions in order to decide, where do we want to live more fully and more authentically in our lives? Where are we not living in alignment with our values? So for me, in that moment, I decided to get real and say, I am not satisfied in my career. It had been so scary in the past to say that out loud, because that meant I was going to have to do something about it. And it also meant that I could no longer go to barbecues and talk to the person next to me and say, graphic design is great, because it sounds really cool. So everybody thinks you must do the coolest thing in the world. So I thought, I'm going to get real with this. I'm going to be surrounded by a community who is also looking at scary, big parts of their lives and wanting to make change. So I did that, took on my career, did this thorough investigation of who am I? Deep down, what fears do I have about changing what I do for work? And what can I do differently to step into my more authentic self? So I came out with all these ingredients, I would say. I didn't know necessarily what the new recipe was going to be yet, but specifically I had this moment where I put this question out on Facebook and I said, friend group, if you could see me doing anything besides graphic design, what would it be? And one of my friends from college that I hadn't seen since then, which was, we graduated in 1999, she said, you would be a great coach. And I thought, I know that word. What is that? I don't know for sure. So I started Googling it. And when I was driving home that night, I saw a license plate that said life coach. spelled it out, the whole words. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to look this up. So I thought, how does one become a life coach and how can I find out more about it? And I looked online to see the schools that were local that were certifying life coaches. And one of them was having an open house the next night. And they only do this quarterly. So I cleared my schedule and I showed up. And in all of this process, I had been doing all these volunteer opportunities to, try to connect more with who I was authentically. And one of the things that I had been doing through this connection to nonviolent communication was working with some folks in the Middle East who were working to create more peace amongst each other. And I thought, if I do life coaching, am I going to have to let go of this other work that I'm so passionate about? And when I walked in, what I took away from that open house is this is super related to nonviolent communication and the volunteering that I've been doing with that. So I have tons of practice. These concepts are highly related to all the workshops that I've been going to. So I have a lot of background already. And B, the woman sitting next to me is from that area in the Middle East that I've been working with people from. So I was like, wow, thank you, universe, for making the signs so clear. And I decided in that moment, life coaching was right for me. The school wasn't necessarily right for me, but that I was going to find the right one. So I did online. I Googled around and I saw one in Portland that was calling my name.
What was that? What's the name of it?
It's called Coach Training World. Mm-hmm. And the teacher facilitator there, her name is Ferocia Knight. She is fabulous. Bright red hair, ball of fire, hugely compassionate. And I talked to her on the phone and it was a fit right away. And she had mentioned that some of her graduates had done some nonviolent communication volunteering in the prisons. She brought this up completely on her own. That was something that I was doing. And so I kept following these little breadcrumbs. And I signed up and I did that course for 6 months and kept taking the train down to Portland and coming back. It was amazing. And I met a whole community of other people who were learning alongside me, and we could practice with each other and coach each other.
How long was that process? Did you say 6 months?
That was 6 months. Yeah.
So you had mentioned to me when we were chatting on the phone recently that you said that your shoulds were really anxiety provoking. They were like a big deal for you. They were giving you a lot of anxiety. So during all this time of you kind of going into your graphic design work and then starting to stumble into, like, the universe is now telling you what to do. So going into this new work, was there anxiety? Was there anxiety in your graphic design work? And then was there anxiety when you were going into the life coaching aspect of it? Because suddenly you were going against, maybe secretly, I don't know, maybe you weren't telling anybody, but there's got to be some anxiety with thinking that you're going to change your career.
Oh, for sure. So I would say, first of all, the interesting thing is the thought of coaching was so deeply resonant with me and felt like such a fit in a way that graphic design, as a sure, that sounds good enough, had never been for me, that the idea of stepping into coaching was very peaceful. I didn't know exactly what that process was going to look like, and I tried not to get too far ahead of myself, because once I start to think about all those details and how it's going to come together, it becomes daunting. But I knew that coaching felt good and peaceful. I would say the graphic design part, how do I communicate this new sense of identity to everybody else? So they see me as a graphic designer. How do I name even what coaching is? Because a lot of people don't necessarily know what it is. And how do I say that I am now a coach? And there's also that part of me that was thinking, I have to give everything up from before to be a coach. It's one or the other. I have to choose. And that feels really heavy. Like all of a sudden you're going to take a step off one platform to another and you're done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was hugely anxiety inducing. And what I learned along the way is that you don't necessarily have to share everything you're up to with everybody and just blurt it out. You get to decide who you're going to share with, how much you're going to share, and when, and roll that out as you're getting more and more comfortable with yourself and your new sense of identity. Because there's this funny place in a career change where you're no longer in one place, but you don't quite know where you are yet, because there's that gap where you don't know what the new reality looks like because you haven't fully stepped into it yet. So how do you communicate that?
And that could be said really of any kind of decision, not even just the
Yes.
career change. I think of that in terms of travel. And, you know, I encourage women in particular to do adventurous things and to get out and travel. And that, I mean, for some people, being adventurous might be going on a trip to New York, staying with a friend, but still just being really nervous about it because it's a big
Yeah.
city. And I do encourage people to be wary of telling the wrong people about their plans, their adventure plans or their travel plans, because one wrong word and you're going to have
Yes.
somebody shoot you down
Yes.
and they're going to tell you all the reasons why you can't do that. And it could be buying a house or buying a new car or trying out a new lifestyle or diet or something like that. Everybody's really quick to shoot things down.
Yes.
Why do you think people are like that?
I honestly think it's because of their own fear, because they may not be willing to take that risk themselves. And then also there are all those stories out in the world and that we hear from people all over the place that are saying, you know, such and such is not possible. Or if you even think about a specific career, somebody in that career always has to do this terrible thing. Somebody in this career never has this awesome perk. So do you really know that to be true, or have you just kind of absorbed that from the atmosphere? What can you actually look for in terms of positive evidence in the people who have succeeded? So that fear, in a way, is doing a really good job of keeping us safe. But safe is not always where we want to be.
Who wants to be safe?
Some people do, but that's not one of
Yeah.
my high priorities.
Yeah. And it's not true. Of course, I want to be safe. You know, there's no doubt about that. And I want other people to be safe, but in a specific context. You want to be safe of body and your person, but
Yeah.
you don't want to necessarily live a safe life.
Yeah. For me, life is about growth and learning, and with that comes discomfort. If you don't experience discomfort, you're not necessarily growing because it takes us to the edge of our comfort zone.
So 6 months at this workshop or the
Yeah.
class going back and forth to
Mhm.
Portland, and then you emerge on the other side.
Emerged on the other side.
And what happened then?
Started building my business on the back end.
Still with your graphic design work. You
Still
were
with my
working
graphic
full-time.
design work.
Mhm.
So yeah, that is a really interesting topic, because speaking of pushback, the main pushback that I received in this process was people telling me, oh, that's great, and you can also do graphic design. At the time, I wanted to leave it completely behind because I had finally found something that I was really excited about in a brand new way. And I didn't get the sense that people were willing to let me let that go. And for some reason, I needed them to tell me it was okay for me to let that go instead of just knowing that within myself. So I kept pushing back. Oh no, I'm leaving graphic design for life coaching. Just let me do that. And so I, was still working at the graphic design job. And then once I started actually coaching clients and getting into the business, I felt this high that I had never felt before. And I felt that I was incorporating all these new parts of my personality that had been kind of tucked away in the past or had never leveraged for work. And also, the place that I was working changed a lot. It had a new mission. It had new management. I had a new team, new ways of doing graphic design, new values, which were highly aligned with my personal values. So all at the same time, I felt content because I was allowing myself to make a living through multiple facets of my personality and working now in a place that wasn't even really the same place that I had been working before. So I work with a lot of clients who refer to themselves as multi-passionate, or once they discover that word, they really resonate with it, because I think it's really cool when people find out that they don't have to completely leave behind the person that they were before, and they can if they want to, but they can also utilize all aspects of their personality.
So they can do perhaps what they think, or what is their passion, or what they think they might want to go into. They can do that. I don't want to say as a hobby, but maybe more part-time, like you're doing?
They could make a career out of multiple things at the same time.
Meaning multiple streams of income.
Yes, multiple streams of income in very unrelated fields, like I'm doing.
And do you feel like that you are one case scenario? Do you think that it works for other people?
Yes.
They don't get too scattered or too unfocused on one particular path?
I find that the people who work with me who come to me for support. If they feel scattered, they know it and they name that and we work on that together and then they become more focused. But actually, I do have a lot of people coming to me, I think because my story involves multiple income streams, they want to be able to also make money through multiple income streams and don't have a lot of examples of how that's done. So it's refreshing for them.
I know some podcasts that I've listened to, and I'm trying to think of where I most recently heard about it, but there was someone being interviewed or interviewing like a Tim Ferriss or someone, and they said, what you really need to do is jump off the ledge. Don't have a safety net, but you really need to go all in and you'll be more successful that way. But it sounds like you're not totally bought into that, like that doesn't have to be the case. Sometimes I'm sure it will be. But like you said, you're the example of how you can make it on multiple levels and multiple streams. And somehow you've integrated it so that it's more fulfilling in both aspects.
Absolutely. Yes, it's so fulfilling. But I would say as far as having to take the leap, I would say that is true for some people. And if that's true for them, they're really going to dig into that and go for it. And when they finally build up that courage. And for other people, they like to have their hand in multiple things and that works for them too. So everybody is really unique. And the modality that I do for coaching is called whole person coaching. And that assumes that everybody is really different and they have their own creative ways of problem solving and living into their authentic self. So I'm not necessarily the type to give sort of answers about how people should handle their situation. I more work with them to discover what their answers are within themselves about the right route forward for them. So there is no recipe that I give. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned the word whole. I'm reading Brené Brown's Daring Greatly
right
now.
I love that book.
Yeah, you've read that.
Yeah.
And she talks about living wholeheartedly. Is that kind of your philosophy of, and I can't remember the exact distinction she says, but she's talking about how those people who are living, and I'm just going to use the term authentic because you've used that.
Yeah.
So those who are living more authentically are living wholeheartedly. And the other ones are the rest of us, because most of us fit in this other bucket where there is insecurity and shame-based and we're struggling with a lot of things and it's just more difficult to get to that wholehearted self. So are you more aligned with that? Are you using the word?
Well, now that you mention that, it does resonate with me really deeply. It's not necessarily something that I draw a comparison with all the time. But I would say if you are stuffing parts of yourself down out of shame or embarrassment or what have you, it's going to be really hard to live authentically and wholeheartedly. And when I think of whole person coaching, for me, what that means is it's impossible to separate who you are in your career from that person that you are in your family or that person that you are in your travel or that person that you are in your growth and learning, all these different areas of your life. If you put yourself into different boxes, you're not going to be able to bring yourself to work every day as your whole self, and you're going to feel constricted and like you're hiding different parts of you and not aligned with your values, and it's going to feel stressful and bad.
Well, let's go back to what you said earlier, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, bring this up as a kind of like gotcha, but earlier you said you want to be careful about how you present maybe your new lifestyle, or you don't want to talk to everyone about some new interests that you have. So how do you reconcile being that whole person, expressing yourself fully, but having to hold back part of yourself to protect yourself, to literally protect yourself?
Well, for me, it is about timing. So when do you choose to share and with whom? So if you're going to work, you get to decide at what stage in my growth and development do I share who I am becoming or have become? Does that make sense?
It does. So you're saying that, I'm going to put words in your mouth. So maybe expressing yourself, maybe not literally, but knowing yourself better and all the facets and silos that you have inside of yourself. That's what you encourage, but revealing those parts to certain people at certain times is really just, it's self-preservation, I think, in some ways.
I actually consider it to be a healthy pace of growth. So when we study nonviolent communication, we talk about that growth edge. So where is your yellow zone where you're growing? And then where is your red zone where you just popped out and made yourself visible or took a step that was too much too fast for you, where you feel like you want to backtrack and step back to where you used to be, because that's the safe place to go back to. So choosing your own adventure in how much you reveal and to whom. So I have an example of this. I have one client that I work with who really doesn't want to name what she's exploring to her parents. And I don't blame her for that at all, because the family can be the hardest one to talk to about these changes, because they have the longest history with you as being one person. And now you're stepping into this other person. So for her, she's holding this new interest as a little seed that she's planting in the ground, and she gets to know it's there, and it's beautiful, and it's exciting that this could bloom and become something. But if she shares it with them too soon, it's like the rains come down and the storm blows the seed out of the ground. So who can you share it with initially that can just give you like the little watering can, of support, and you nurture it yourself, find those people who are going to help you nurture it. And then when it's stronger and it's grown into more of like a sapling, you get to share it with more people. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. So that reminds me of something that I found really fascinating that I heard from someone else. So this is, we're talking about being bold here, right?
Yes.
In many levels. And I got an email from someone recently who said, I'm paraphrasing, I'm trying to come to terms with it being okay to be unbold, or unbolding myself, I think was her term. And I said, what is that? Like, can you explain that more? I'm really curious. And she said, yes, I just think that sometimes it's okay not to be bold. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's kind of like FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. And I thought maybe that's what she's feeling. She's part of we've got a Be Bold Facebook group, and I think she's part of that. And so for her, she might be feeling a lot of pressure to make certain decisions and get out there and say, today I'm going to be bold. And she just isn't feeling it.
Right.
So she's giving herself permission not to be bold. And I thought that was really interesting. I almost feel bad because I'm on there going, be bold, ladies, come on, you can do these interesting things, or tell me what you're doing to be bold. And she's just going, screw it. I don't want to be bold,
Which is kind of a bold statement, because it's a vulnerable statement to make in that atmosphere surrounded by those people.
I know.
Isn't it?
I said, please post that. She said, I've been thinking about posting something on that group about it. And I hope that she does, because I think it would open up a really interesting conversation. Because like I said, it reminds me of, I've got another friend who said, I do everything because I have FOMO. Someone pointed out to me recently that I have FOMO, and she's just got this fear of missing out. So she goes along, and she does, she grabs life by the tail, and she does all these great things. And by all accounts, looking in, she's very adventurous and amazing. But I think that there's a lot of pressure that she's putting on herself that's making her do all these sorts of things. It's interesting that just the stories that we tell ourselves, the pressure that we put on ourselves without even realizing it.
Yes. I have a friend, we were out to dinner one night, and she mentioned what she called the pressure to be epic. And I thought this was really interesting. And I thought I have to write that down, because I have seen that out in the world, where unless you're going for it all and doing it all, going from 0 to 60 immediately, then you're not getting out there, and you're shrinking and you're making yourself small. And for me, I really think that it is about deciding the growth pace that's right for you. And your growth pace might be really different than somebody else. But as long as you're not hiding and you're still stepping out there, you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that I do think that I'm guilty of being epic. It's like,
and that's right for you.
Yeah, it is right for me. But it's also, people say, you're always traveling. Are you ever home? And I'm like, yeah, I just don't post, I don't post on social media when I'm home. Although, because people have been saying that to me more and more, I think in this past week, I posted a couple of things, with me in Seattle, just to show people that I am around. But that's probably the stuff that people don't remember. That's whatever, I just posted this beautiful little coffee cup, like I love being in Seattle and having my little coffee, you know?
I remember you named who made the coffee cup.
I know.
You posted your bike ride and that you got a great shirt at a thrift shop for like $10. I'm seeing this stuff.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's local.
Thanks. Yeah. So that is the local stuff. But I certainly, I hear from more people that they appreciate, they live vicariously. And I think that they do think differently about their life when they see what they think is more epic than what they're doing. I think that that can be a good thing because, you know, if you're inspired by others, I mean, I'm certainly inspired by others when they're doing either epic shit or, you know, just like doing amazing things, you know, because it gets my creative juices flowing.
Oh my gosh. So I would say that was key to my journey in this process is when I was in that nonviolent communication community and that leadership group, I was surrounded by people who were going for it, fully going for it. And to not go for it was to be really out of place in that atmosphere. So I always encourage my clients and everybody that I know to surround themselves with people who are going for big, awesome things because that becomes your new norm.
Hence your podcast, Women Who Went For It.
Exactly.
Yes. And that's perfect. And your clients are women that you're working with as well. Why did you choose to work with women?
That is a good question. So in my experience, there are a lot of women who are like me who have lived a lot of their lives really looking to please other people. So I think there's that part of our society that teaches women to look out there and even anticipate other people's needs and see how they might show up for them by supporting them, lending an ear, helping them grow and helping them with their relationships, and really forgets to even notice what we might want for ourselves because we're so wrapped up in helping make other people happy, which is really, really satisfying. Until it's not, until your cup is empty because you've spent it all on somebody else or a lot of other people.
How do you know if you're a people pleaser? And the reason I ask is because I don't know if I am or not. I have really strong opinions about things. And when I want to do something, I do it. And probably to my detriment and the loved ones around me, I'm off before I ask anyone permission. But I also have this internal voice constantly going on about what will people think? What does this person think? Am I doing the right thing? There's also that going. And I think part of that is meditation and that I'm aware of my thoughts, and most people aren't. I don't think that they are. So I wonder, to some extent, am I a people pleaser? And so when you talk about that, I wonder, am I? I'm not really sure. So I'm just wondering, how can someone be certain about that?
Well, I don't know that there is necessarily certainty, but when I was listening to you talk, it didn't sound to me like you were a people pleaser. It sounds to me like you have that naturally human inner voice that is questioning what other people might think. I think most of us do that. And yet you're making decisions based on what you want and not asking for permission. So I would say for those people who are listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, you know what? I do make a lot of decisions based on what I think other people might want, or I am asking for permission to do all of these different things in my life. They are probably more people pleaser oriented.
Okay, that's good to know. Do you know Gretchen Rubin's work?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. She has this philosophy book called The Four Tendencies. And she lists, and I don't recall all of them right now. I only recall the one that I think I am. But she lists kind of the 4 ways that people interact in the world. And mine is rebel. And so I'm fairly certain of that.
I don't think you're a people pleaser.
No, and I wasn't completely sure. Like when I first heard it, my husband, John, he said, "Oh, you've got to listen to this podcast with Gretchen Rubin. And there's one of those in there that you are." And I'm listening to them. I'm like, no, I'm not number 1. No, I'm not number 2. No, I'm not number 3. What could possibly be it? Oh my God, rebel, total rebel. If someone asks me to do something, I'm like, no way, I'm doing the other thing.
Yeah.
That's my first
gosh,
response
that's
to
funny.
it. So yeah.
Yeah. I actually have a story to demonstrate my past people pleasingness if you want to hear it.
Do tell.
Okay. So I was talking about this in a video that I posted the other day on Facebook about how I learned when I was growing up from various voices. I couldn't even necessarily pinpoint exactly who they were at this point, but the message that I took in was, unless you already have plans with somebody else to show up for them, to listen, to lend an ear, to support them, to hang out with them, then if somebody asks you to get together or lend an ear, you say yes. So there's really no space for you in there. And when you're somebody who loves a lot of people like I do, there are a lot of requests coming in. So for me, I recall one specific day where I got 13 requests from different people outside of work in my personal life to help people, to listen to people, to hang out with people all at the same time. I felt like a puppet on a string. I didn't feel like I had time for myself. My time was not my own. It was at the mercy of whoever asked me to be there for them. And so at that moment, I thought something has got to change. And that's when I really decided to step in and learn how to say no, practice saying no, find friends who are willing to practice saying no with me, even to each other. Encourage each other by saying thank you for taking care of yourself instead of saying yes to me, even when we asked each other to do something, and really get clear on where our yeses are. So that is an example in my life.
I know you have a sister. Do you have other siblings?
Nope, just the one sister.
How old is she?
Yeah, she's 3.5 years older than me.
Okay, and so you were probably pretty close.
I would say we had an on again, off again relationship.
Okay. But did you look to her for camaraderie and friendship?
Oh, yes, definitely. I admired her a lot. Yeah.
I have 3 older brothers, and they're 7, 9, and 11 years older than I am. And so by the time I was in my early teens, they were out. So by the time I was 9, 10, they're starting to mature out of the house and go to school. And so I spent a lot of time alone. And that's how I remember my afternoons, coming home from school. Is a lot of alone time. And I filled it pretty well with probably like with TV and that kind of thing and music, but a lot of alone time. And so I have this predisposition that if someone asks me to do something, my first response is no, because I really like my alone time. And I look at people I do a lot of travel, as you know, and if I go to a speaking gig in San Diego or Dallas or Denver, I look at people who are also at those events and they say, hey, Dallas, I'm in your neighborhood. Who's out there who wants to meet? I can't do that because I want to go. I want to do my little speaking event, and then I want to go to my hotel room or my friend that I'm staying with. And I just want my downtime.
Yes.
I have to be alone. Yeah. So here you are. And I always think I ask a lot of my guests this same question because I think it goes back to that family of origin of what we're used to. So you're more used to having someone around who's relatively in your age range, and you're just more used to maybe pleasing her. Who knows?
And I would say that there is even more to it than that, because when I was growing up, my parents owned a motel. And our house was attached to that motel. And so that was one of the things that I had to work through in this career shift is the concept that you could do what you love, but not get completely sucked in. Because my growing up atmosphere was you behave in the way that's pleasing to the people who are around you, who are the customers. They are always around, attached. Same building. So
did you like that?
It was really fascinating.
What was fascinating about it?
So, just meeting people from all over the world. Even though we were in rural Montana, we would have people come through and I would collect coins. I definitely remember this. My parents would always get me coins from the different people who came through. So I remember these guys coming in from Yugoslavia, and I was so excited to get coins from them. And I would go around, and this is so funny. I don't know why I did this, but I would walk around the motel and I would track where are all the license plates from, and are we getting them from all 50 states, or where are people coming from? So meeting lots of people was awesome, and having my slumber parties in rooms that were adjacent to each other with a door was awesome. Yes.
Oh, that is cool.
It was really cool. And then when my sister was a teenager, she moved out of the room that we shared, and she moved into one of the motel rooms. So that became her room, which gave her a very easy in and out during the night. But yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It was a really different kind of living experience for sure. Pros and cons.
Are your parents still around?
They are. They're not at the motel anymore, though. They sold that when I was about 17.
Was that traumatic for you for them to have sold it? And
no, because they were moving into a really cool house by the lake. So I was like,
finally,
this awesome view with a hot tub. I'm in. So
yeah, that's great. Did you try to please them? Do you feel like?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. My parents, they are, I would say, very good people. I would consider them very responsible. They have always been the people who have done business amazingly. Entrepreneurs, always paid the bills on time. Like, how can I emulate them and be really responsible, do a good job, show up where I need to show up, and have them happy with me?
Typically, the type of women, who do you work with?
That's a good question. So I work with people who are at a crossroads, and it's almost kind of predictable when they come to me. So something in their life has caused them to shift and reconsider where they want to be moving forward to. So they might have had a milestone birthday. They might have kids are graduating and going off to college, and they're not quite sure who they are if they're not the mom. They might be getting a divorce. They might be laid off from a position and realized it wasn't right for them anyway. So now what do they want to do?
Would you say that they're in pain?
They are in pain. A lot of times they're in pain.
Do you think that pain is necessary for people to make a change?
I would say a lot of times it's a catalyst. I don't think it's necessary, but I would say a lot of times it is definitely a catalyst, and it will light a fire under you for sure.
So they're coming to you. They want to make a change because of whatever's happening in their life.
Yeah.
Have you ever turned down a potential client?
For sure. I mean, there are people who come to me who are looking for help with, LinkedIn and interview and resume skills and that kind of thing. And I say, actually, what you're looking for is a career counselor. So I have some people that I can send you to for that. Or if they already know really where they want to go from here, but they're a little afraid to say it out loud, we might just have that initial 30-minute conversation. And I can just say, it sounds to me like you're pretty clear on what your passion is and what you want to explore from here.
But you haven't had anyone come to you that you just felt is super toxic and not good for you or your personality?
I would say not yet.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm just
Fingers
curious.
Crossed, yeah.
I'm just always curious about that because that's all part of the process, isn't it? Saying no to people.
Oh, for sure. And I don't always get the sense when I'm on an initial phone call with somebody that they realize that we're making a joint agreement about whether or not it's right for us to work together. It sounds to me sometimes like they are like, okay, well, then I'm up for working with you, without the question of, does it sound like a good fit for us to work together? And so that's when I bring it back in about, sounds like a good fit, or these are the things that I want to ask you about to make sure it's a good fit for me as well.
What do you learn from the people that you work with?
Oh my gosh. So the thing about working with other people, I think, in any capacity is that they mirror back to you the questions that you have going on in your own life. So say I'm encouraging people to step out of the shadows and allow themselves to be more seen. It gives me the opportunity to see, am I fully stepping out of my own shadows and allowing to myself to be seen in all areas? So that would be one example.
You mentioned stepping out of the shadows. There's someone who's done a lot of work in terms of that. Ford is her last name?
Debbie Ford.
Debbie Ford.
Yes.
So have you learned from Debbie Ford's work?
Absolutely. And that pulls upon the work of Carl Jung too, and the shadow side. If any of you are curious about learning how those aspects of yourself that you maybe tend to hide or conceal or put in the background can actually be leveraged and be your superpowers if you work on them and allow them to go into the light.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah. So somebody could consider themselves really stubborn. And so they try to unidentify with that. They get mad when somebody else calls them stubborn, or they just think, oh, absolutely, that's not a part of me. But if they start to leverage the places where their stubbornness has served them well, it can actually be really good. Like maybe it would serve the rebel to be stubborn, saying, I actually know what's right for me. And so I'm going to go do that thing, no matter what other people might try to push me toward.
So right now you're working in two different worlds. You're working as a designer, as a graphic designer. You've come around to loving your work again.
Yes.
Because you didn't for a long time. Well, do you ever think, I do want to get out of this and just do the coaching full time? Or are you pretty solid in developing both equally?
I would say eventually I can imagine doing the coaching full time, and it's not an immediate goal for me. I'm really happy where I am right now.
I'll just ask, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to chat about today? Any kind of top bits of information that maybe you share with clients?
Yeah, I guess I would just share a little bit more about what people come to me for. So we talked a little bit about the types of women that come to me. And so what I find is they're really needing the clarity about where to go next, the courage to be able to step into it, and the momentum. So taking those initial steps. And there's a lot of fear that comes up for people. You know, they think it's too late in life to do something different. If I do something different, it's kind of that all or nothing that we talked about earlier. What are people going to say? These kinds of things that we talked about. So looking at the areas where more fear might arise and taking steps forward regardless, and opening up that willingness to explore the possibilities. So, you know, if you had come to me back in the day when you were not quite open to the idea of making money from travel, we might do some exercises that would highlight travel is your true passion and be able to pull forward that question of, so how can I make money from this, instead of slamming the door on it immediately.
What if a person doesn't know what their passion is?
Oh my gosh, it happens all the time. So we have a lot of exercises that we do together that allow them to see the difference between their interests and their passions. So the things that they are compelled to do no matter what, like travel was for you. And then they might deny that that is their passion because they can't see a way to make money from it yet. So there's other things that they might stumble upon in the process where they're going out and trying new things that they're curious about, and try on something that winds up being their passion that they had never even done before, which is really exciting. So they might not have even had firsthand exposure to the thing that winds up being what they're passionate about.
What about the person? And I just got this question going to the East Coast. I got this question from a couple of people who said, aren't you tired of travel? Like now that you've made it your business, because I've been traveling for about 30 years and I've had basically a travel or tour business for 10 to 12 years. It's come about in segments, but I've been leading tours for 10 years, but I left my job about 12, 13 years ago and wrote my first book.
Yeah.
So it's been a while and people are curious, like, aren't you tired of travel at this point? And I know a lot of people do get burnt out. I have a friend who was making chocolates and I think that actually I've got two friends, Yum,
Good friends to have.
Yeah, who are in the chocolate business, just from their home making chocolates. And they got burnt out on it. So how do you pursue your passion, pursue your interests, make some money from it, but then not get burnt out at doing it?
So the really cool thing about passions is that they are energy giving. So that is one of the ways to recognize them as a passion, is suddenly you feel like you're on fire and you have all of this energy that you didn't have before to dedicate to it. So for me, I can be working during the day on graphic design and then go out meet with clients for hours, be done at 9 p.m. And I go to bed by 9:30 so that I can be up at 5:30. And sometimes it's really hard for me to even get to sleep, not because I am drained from working so much, but because I am exhilarated from doing what I love. It's hard for me to even turn off that brain. So that's when I practice meditation when I'm in bed.
Well, what are your hobbies and how do you spend your kind of quote unquote downtime?
So yeah, downtime is less right now because I am doing a couple jobs. But one of my favorite things to do is volunteer for an organization called Kids for Peace Seattle. And it is an interfaith organization that works with youth on social justice type activities and camps and get-togethers so that they can learn about each other's spirituality and use that as a force for good in the world. So I'm on the board for that. That's fun. I love to do hiking. So I make sure to get out hiking. I love to get together for meals with friends. Yeah.
Do you travel?
I do travel sometimes. I do more domestic than I do international.
For vacation, or is that part of business, family?
Vacation.
Okay.
Yeah. I love road trips. Camping road trips, especially. Camping road trips are my favorite.
Because it gets you out into the national parks.
Yes, and into nature.
Yeah, that's nice. I love road trips myself. If I'm not driving, I usually fall right to sleep. If I'm the passenger.
Yeah.
But I do love long trips, just driving, and it's great. Being bold. This is the Be Bold podcast. Yeah. What does it mean to you to be bold, or maybe even in the context of the people that you work with, the women that you work with? What do you see being bold as?
I see being bold in the context of the work I do and in a lot of life as being willing to choose to do what pleases you.
Period. That's a big deal. I think that's really difficult.
Really difficult. It is the root of the work I do.
I think so many of us, especially women, it goes back to being a kid. And I think you alluded to this at some point where these stories are so ingrained in us that we're told at such an early age the things that we can, can't, shouldn't do, that we stop questioning them. We stop questioning ourselves, or we stop questioning the messages that are out there. And we just like internally, we tell ourselves stories.
It's done. That's just the truth. That's all there is to it. Why even investigate?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. So I love the fact that you're doing so much work on so many different levels too, on yourself. You're doing so much exploring.
I think it's a requirement of what I do. If I'm not learning and growing, how can I support other people in that process?
Well, that's true. But also, I think it's an important lesson for other people to hear, to do the exploring. Because I know some people do it and they go overboard, and that's all they're doing is self-development,
right.
Kind of navel gazing basically all the time, and then talking stuff out. But then there's some people who don't want to look at all.
Yeah, there's a huge spectrum there for sure.
Yeah. Where can a person start in terms of getting to know themselves?
Oh, yeah. Goodness. They could take a workshop. They could take a class. They could read a book. They could listen to a podcast like this.
Yeah.
So I would say, what are your favorite methods of learning? Is it audio? Is it in person? Is it one-on-one with somebody? And what topics are really calling to you? You know, if you're to walk into a bookstore, what section do you always gravitate toward? That says a lot. What do you find yourself talking about over and over again with the people that you love? And go learn more about that topic. If it's just, this odd curiosity and you don't know why it's calling to you, you don't have to know, but just allow yourself to get curious and explore it, because that in itself is an adventure.
I spend a lot of time in the cookbook sections, but I don't cook a lot, which is really funny.
Yeah. What is that about, do you think?
I don't know. I'm just always, I'm inspired, especially by beautiful cookbooks. I'm mostly plant-based eater.
Yeah.
And so I'm always looking to see what else is out there. And even the most elaborate ones I never make, but I'm always curious as to what people are doing. I think part of me wishes that I would give myself like a couple of hours a day to actually cook, and I don't. I look at the clock and I go, oh my gosh, it's 12:30. I'm starting to get a little bit hungry. Let me go throw something together. I don't do the planning for it, but I think I have this fantasy in my head about wanting to be more elaborate and create more interesting meals. But that's where I always, when you talk about going into the bookstore, that's what
Well, do you do that sometimes though?
I do it on occasion. Yeah. But when I travel, the first thing I do is I go to a grocery store and I buy all these spices. And then I've got all these spices in the pantry that are expired, I'm sure, but I'm sure they still taste good.
Yeah, because there's a huge gap between, not doing it at all and then doing it every day, preparing for 2 hours. So if you decided something you want to incorporate, hey, you don't have to go all or nothing.
Right. But hey, I know I'm also not the only one. All the people, I don't watch these, but all the people who watch the cooking shows who never cook.
Absolutely.
I think, I don't know what that's all about, but
it's an art, right? We can go to a museum without having to do the art ourselves, and we can look at cookbooks without having to actually cook the thing, but it's very satisfying looking at it.
It is. Thanks for that permission to go hang out
My pleasure.
Elliott Bay Books.
Do it.
I love Elliott Bay Books.
It's such a nice store.
Yeah, it is great. So I'll hang out in there and look at Buddhism and cookbooks.
There you go.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
They can go to my website. That is saramcardle.com. So it's SaramcArdle.com. SaraMcArdle.com. They can go to my Instagram, which is Sara McArdle Coaching, sara.mcardle.coaching. I am at Sara McArdle Coaching on Facebook, and I also have a Women Who Went For It Facebook page.
And podcast.
You can listen to my podcast, womenwhowentforit.com, and I would actually encourage you to find that on whatever podcast app you normally use and add it. Please.
Excellent.
And there is an episode with Beth.
I know there
listen
is.
to that one.
Yeah, so people will get to hear a little bit different side of what I normally talk about. So
and me too.
Yeah. Awesome. Sara, thanks so much for coming today. Appreciate it.
What a pleasure.
Definitely check out Sara's podcast and her coaching if you're in the middle of a transition or just thinking about one. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed to the Be Bold podcast. When you do so, it helps give the podcast more visibility in whatever podcast service you're using. And please share this on social media. You can just use the hashtag BeBold if you like, or simply just share it with a friend. I would so appreciate you helping me spread the word. I'm always on the lookout for new podcast guests. If you know of anyone or you yourself would be a good fit, simply fill out the guest submission form on the BeBoldPodcast.com website. I only record in person and often record in Seattle, but as you know, I travel a lot, and that gives me the chance to meet up with people on the road. I'm going to be in Kauai in mid-September, New York City in late September, and I'm planning to squeeze in a trip to Portland, San Francisco, and or Los Angeles in the coming months. So if you know anybody in those locations, let me know. For show notes, check out the BeBoldPodcast.com website for each episode and sign up for email alerts each time a new episode comes out. While you're online, go to the Be Bold Podcast Facebook page and give that a like. You can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. You can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com. Sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive a series of tips for making your travels safer. As I mentioned earlier, you can find out about the tours I lead at wandertours.com. And ladies, don't forget about that Facebook group. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.